And officially welcome everyone to today's Lunch with Haley webinar. So today's webinar is a follow-up. I think we actually have a couple of follow-ups on last month's webinar where we introduced the concept of creating a growth engine. We'll show you a little bit more about that in case you missed it, coming up in a few slides. But today's topic is all about fixing your sales funnel. So we're going to be looking at some techniques for prospecting, nurturing relationships with clients, former clients, other audiences, and ways to follow up. We're going to be talking about strategies and tactics. And today I'm joined by Brad Smith, our Chief Strategy Officer, and Rachel Reed, our Senior Automation Wizard. I don't know what the right title is there for you,
I
Rachel,
like that.
but the definite know-it-all of that sounds terrible. Expert on all things we are doing with automation and then some. All right, but I get the easy job today. All I get to do is really kick things off and frame where we're headed with today's webinar. So, what's so hard about selling staffing? I mean, it's not like there's a lot of competition. Demand is down. Customers are worse to deal with than ever. Talent is hard to find. I mean, yeah, there's a lot of things. In a word, it seems like everything. I saw a note from a client that came in earlier today, I think it was, and they were asking about just what it was like selling. And they said, I've never seen it this hard. This was somebody who's been in the industry a long time. And so, like, what's going on? Why has staffing gotten so hard? These are all things that I'm sure you're very familiar with. There's less hiring overall. The data is people are using fewer temps as a percentage of their workforce than they were years ago. And we went from this explosion during COVID, and really great times for most of the staffing industry to this now it's going on 3-year hangover where we've been in a decline mode and it's been super hard to find opportunities for temporary staffing with some exceptions. Although I'm really happy to see a rebound, it looks like, coming around in healthcare finally. More companies are DIYing it. They're either direct hire, direct sourcing. As I mentioned, contingent staff, which was once about 3% of the workforce, is now down to about 1.6%. That's a lot of temporary job loss. The COVID backlash. Um, all right, don't tell anybody, but we got to the point that we couldn't find any good talent because there was so much demand. And so we did a little bit of putting some square pegs in round holes or attempting to fit round pegs in round holes that weren't quite the same size. And clients got frustrated because they were finding that what we were doing wasn't to the level of reliability they wanted. We weren't consistently providing the quality they demanded. And also related to that, they were over hiring during the COVID years, particularly in certain skill disciplines where it was hard to find talent. Economy slows down for our clients. They're like, I have too many people. Last thing I need is temps. I need to start cutting back on my own workforce. You've seen more layoffs and, again, less use of contingent staffing. Then, of course, the growth in competition. Wasn't that long ago, the competitor meant the company down the street. Now it means companies all around the world, offshore, nearshore. Now it means platforms. So everybody has talked for a decade about who's going to be the Uber of staffing. And while there is no one company that's doing that, there are lots of companies that have introduced staffing platforms. And then, of course, you basically can't look at a social feed or turn on the news and not see AI and the impact on jobs. I was actually just handed an article by actually it's by Vicky, my co-CEO, that I didn't realize was read by 72 million people. And it was one of the kind of a founding individual in the AI world just talking about how his job as a coder can be 100% done by AI now. And what does that mean for his future? And what does it mean for people everywhere? And it was a fascinating article. And so if you missed that, didn't see it, would like us to send it, reach out to us afterwards. I have a copy of it. I'd be happy to share. Then, to make matters worse, client expectations have continued to go up. More speed, more efficiency, but don't let the quality fall at all. And there's more people in the client's offices making decisions. So now we're not just selling to HR or not just selling to hiring managers. We could have HR, hiring managers, department heads. We could have a financial executive purchasing. We've got so many people that we need to win over. all of whom see a different value proposition in staffing services. And if we don't win all of them over, we're not going to get a chance to provide service to that company. And it's the gatekeeper person, the HR person, has a bigger incentive than ever because their resources are being cut. So their incentive is don't take a risk because my job's at risk if I take a risk. So switching staffing vendors is a risk. There's less risk to staying with what you already have, again, making it harder to sell. And then just overall, more stress, overwhelm. It's hard to get people on the phone. It's hard to get their attention. I mean, I will bet of the people who are dialed in right now, there's a percentage of them who are reading email and doing something else and not 100% focused on what we're talking about. Shame on you. No, just kidding. But it's very, very hard to get a hold of people. It's very, very hard to get their attention. And as a result, it's harder to sell. So, guys, you add this all up, and what you have is this really tough environment to sell. And what we as an industry have done in years past when it was hard to sell, we just said make more calls, dial the phone more often. But what we're hearing from clients is twofold. Number one, make more calls is not getting them more appointments, or at least not the number they want. And it's really, really hard to get the salespeople and the recruiters to make the calls. We've seen people, owners of businesses, very, very frustrated that they can't get the volume of activity they'd like to see. So last month, we introduced you to this diagram, creating a staffing growth engine, thinking about having strategic targeting that goes to systematic outreach, that goes to multi-channel engagement, having optimized conversion paths, and having a long-term perspective on how we win people over months and years to create this growth engine loop. And then we talked about the 7 elements of the growth engine, which we're not going to go through today, but we are going to talk about a few of them and the things that go into creating your sales leads, your lead funnel. So I'm going to go down one more and we're going to transition like, how do you win in this market? And Brad, I'm going to let you take it over.
Yeah, so how do you win in this market? Really, you're looking at, David, and you just teed it up, building multi-channel funnels. So, how do you go about building a multi-channel funnel, and what does that really mean? So, you just mentioned that a lot of staffing owners are frustrated because they can't get their salespeople or their recruiters to make more calls. It's a challenge. Most salespeople are giving up after 2 calls. And historically, the data was, hey, you need to make 5 to 7 impressions before you get any level of engagement. Fast forward to a few years back, and it was 10 to 20. And I don't want to be the bearer of bad news, but one of my clients, very savvy tech company in Austin, they actually did an analysis and they track everything, every touch point. They found that on average, they needed over 70 touches with a prospect before that prospect engaged in any way or scheduled an appointment. 70, 7-0. So if most people, salespeople, are giving up after 2 calls, you're only 68 short. So it becomes a real challenge if all you're doing is hoping that dialing for dollars or more calls are going to work. And I'm not saying don't make those calls. You definitely need to. But you need to surround and support your sales team and your recruiters with air cover. So, what I mean by that is we need better systems. Sales on its own is not necessarily going to reach your goals. We need to combine sales with marketing and automation so that we get those 70 touches systematically and we can actually do it. So, the multi-channel funnel really makes sure that you have always on prospecting. So you're providing your sales team, your recruiters with that air cover. You're making sure that you're having multiple touch points throughout the week with those prospects, not in a annoying or invasive way, but you're front and center. You're top of mind so that when a hiring need does come up, they're more likely to take that sales call. We need to make sure that we have very defined target segments, and we'll get into segmenting and choosing who to target in a little bit. We want to make sure that we have automation and intent triggers established. An intent trigger is a signal that this person is in the decision making process and probably does need a sales follow up call and does need to talk to a salesperson. If we can look at those intent triggers, that's going to make those cold calls way more effective. We need to look at sales enablement and buyer enablement. And we'll get into some statistics here that show that most of the decision-making process is done before anyone even talks to your company. And then we'll dig into employer attraction and making sure that we're continually feeding our sales and marketing funnel so that we can meet those goals. So let's get into some of these things and dig a little bit deeper. And I always like to start with who should you target? And I like to say we need to start with the low hanging fruit. I will tell you that sometimes this is a challenge because when I ask staffing companies who they should target and who their key client is, they say everyone. Even yesterday, internally here at Haley Marketing Group, we were having a discussion and we were talking about the 25,000 staffing companies out there that are our target. And sometimes we ignore the people, the low hanging fruit that we should really focus on. So, what do I mean by that? Well, staffing companies, when you look at who you should target, really, I look at four key buckets, or in this case, pools. We've got our current clients, we've got former or dormant clients, we have our placed talent, and then we have what I like to call narrowly defined ICPs or ideal client profiles. The challenge here is that oftentimes, staffing companies don't have narrowly defined cold ICPs. They say we can staff for any business that hires people, or we can do anything in light industrial and office staffing, or we can do everything from pickers, packers to medical professionals, even though they've only done that once ever. So, the challenge that we run into is not defining who our ideal client truly really is. And when we don't do that, most of our effort, our sales effort and our outreach effort gets stuck on cold leads. And that really is the hardest lead to close. So let's flip that. Let's spend 80% of our time on current clients, former and dormant clients, and our placed talent. I'm not saying ignore cold leads, but let's narrow in on who the right cold lead is. And if we can do that, we're going to see a lot more success and a lot more revenue come in. Now, let's break into each one of these targets. So, I like to start with current clients. Again, this is our lowest hanging fruit. Our easiest path to revenue growth often is our current clients. So, how can we grow within our current clients to help meet our sales goal and help make our sales team more impactful, more effective? Well, first and foremost, let's look at additional departments. And I like to use the analogy of three up, three down. Or I'm sorry, three by three. So what I mean by that is you're going to look at your existing buyer right now, and you're going to look at their peers. So who is a peer in their organization, and let's cross sell into those other departments. Then we're going to look one level up. So let's say you're selling into the VP of operations right now. Maybe then we begin to build a relationship with the COO, the CFO, the CEO. And then maybe we go one level below and we build some relationships with the QA manager or an operations specialist. This is going to help you cross sell into other areas, but then also help you protect that revenue because we all know in staffing, there's turnover. So we want to make sure that if that VP of operations who we've built that amazing relationship with leaves, we're protecting that revenue because we have surrounded ourselves with other buyers, other peers, other leaders, other support team members that might assume that role. And we've got great relationships across the board. It's really going to help us cross sell and broaden our reach within our existing current clients. Then let's be on the lookout and make sure that whenever there's a new location or an expansion or an acquisition, that we're aware of that. And we have a game plan right away, and our teams know what to do in order to maintain that revenue and build new relationships with new individuals. Then you can look at other service lines. So I just had a conversation with a client the other day. They do general light industrial staffing, and they've got someone on their team that is a expert in OSHA certification, that's an expert safety manager, they don't really promote that at all. It could be a great in and an opportunity to get their consultant in the door, not in terms of selling staffing, but in looking at overall operations, at safety, at compliance, at risk mitigation, and then introduce the staffing side of things. So think about what related service lines you have. Also, if you're going into a new client and maybe you've been brought in to fill just general picker packer roles, well, you're probably known as the staffing company that does great in that space. But think about other areas that you really do well. You're going to have to educate that market that not only can you place that picker packer, but you've done a lot of work on sourcing logistics experts or key leaders or COOs to help run more efficient operations. So make sure that you don't get pigeonholed with your current clients as only being able to do a small portion of everything else that you do. That's going to take education, continual touch points, and making sure that people truly know your full lines of service. And that's really going to help you sell into higher margin roles, those bigger, higher level positions. You could look at creating exclusives with clients or providing some type of promotion if you have the opportunity to fill their roles first. And then a lot of organizations are looking at workforce consulting or SOW relationships. So think about other ways that you can repackage or reposition just general staffing services into more holistic workforce management. And then once you've identified, your current clients, your opportunities, some things that you can do to really engage that client base is looking at ATS or CRM triggered check-ins. So making sure that there's a consistent touch point. Doing quarterly business reviews. I have several clients that do local labor market updates where they'll go through each month and use some data sources and points to really identify what's happening in the local labor market or in a specific industry. And they're known as the leader in that market so that when hiring managers, when owners, when operations managers have questions about what's going on in the workforce in a specific city or industry, you become the go-to expert for that. That's a great position to be in. And then executive level value added content. So don't just think about producing content that relates exactly to staffing. Think more holistically. What are all the business problems that your clients face? And let's become a thought leader in a variety of different topics, not just, hey, here's how to recruit better. So those are your current clients. Now let's look at former and dormant clients. So what I mean by a dormant client is maybe somebody that hasn't done business with you in the last 6 months. Maybe the relationship didn't end, but you're just not top of mind with them. These are the people that if they bought once, they're likely to listen to you. They're likely to potentially buy again. So falling into this category would be maybe new leadership. If you see that they've hired a new department head or new operations manager or something else, it's a trigger that you should be reaching out and reactivating, re-engaging. Maybe you've noticed or seen an increase in internal job postings and they're trying to do it on their own, like David mentioned earlier. Great time to reach out. Maybe you've noticed and seen higher turnover that's led to more job postings, or there's been some growth signals, or increased or decreased competition in their industry or their market. Maybe you've seen funding announcements. Based on your past history, maybe you can identify and see cyclical demand and reach out to them to be proactive about recruiting. And then just make sure that you have some top of mind awareness. And another one that I don't even have on here is skill marketing. Let's consistently skill market to those former and dormant clients. So we did this for one of my clients. They have offices in several locations across the U.S. and we looked at their ATS and their CRM, and we exported a list of clients that were in their CRM that hadn't placed an order in the last 6 months. And we did a 3-year look back. And we created a campaign where we just put together all of the different resources, all of the tech advancements, all of the awards that they've won, all of the case studies that they've built over the last 3 years. And we created a campaign about around that. And then what we did is we took that list of companies and we looked at who the buyers were, and we looked at the buyer by job title. And then we customized each of those campaign steps, and it was a 10-step reactivation campaign. We created 5 different versions, one for HR, one for hiring managers, one for owners, one for CFOs, and I believe the last one was a general run or one for procurement. But we customized that message to be focused on the pains of that hiring manager or that owner or that CFO. And we outlined all the advancements that this company has made over the last 12 months. Again, this was a 10-step campaign, all customized by job, by buyer and job type, and it generated almost $1 million in revenue. This was an email automation series. So, former and dormant clients, this is just money that's sitting on the table out there. And if you can build a process to stay in front of those people, to differentiate, to show value, not just say, hey, you should work with us again, it's a great opportunity to re engage those people and get them back on the books and driving revenue. Next, I want to look at a often overlooked audience, which is your placed talent. So, the candidates that you've worked with over the last few years, those are today and tomorrow's hiring managers, especially if they're good talent. What's great about this is that they should already trust you. And, if you've helped them find a job and helped them in their career success, they oftentimes are extremely thankful there. They've lived your values. They've seen the value that you provide to the equation. They know that you recruit great people because you recruited them. And they often move into decision maker roles. So this is an audience that is just sitting there that you should stay connected with. I think there's value on two sides. If they're considering making a move, then maybe they're a candidate that you can skill market and replace to the next job. If they've advanced and they're in a hiring role, let's leverage and build on that relationship and get some job orders out of it. So, what should you do here? Well, I would look at your ATS and put some triggers in there. Let's make sure that we have career check-in automations built. Let's, if nothing else, leverage those people as a referral source for your open jobs right now. Let's check in and see how they're doing. Let's check in and see what's happening in their world. What are some of their big challenges or problems now? If there's been promotions or they've changed job roles, let's use that as a trigger to reach out and touch base with them and see how things are going in their new role, see what their current needs are, see if they need any additional support or have hiring plans. In the very least, let's create a alumni newsletter that stays in touch with these people, or have a congratulations on your promotion or congratulations on the award you won outreach. And then I always like to stay in touch with these people and follow them to their next company. So if you do notice that they've switched companies and gone in a different direction, use that as an opportunity to reach out to them, find out how they found that job so that you can stay connected, but then have a discussion about what that new role entails, what support they might need to be successful. And let's position yourself as a resource, not just because you placed them one time, but because you want to be engaged and involved in their next career move. You want to make sure that they're successful in a managerial or a leadership role. And let's follow them throughout their entire career because they could get you into a lot of new great companies and help you build a lot of business. All right. And our fourth and final audience, these are our cold ICPs. When I first started this section, I mentioned that the majority of staffing companies out there, 80% of their focus is here. Okay. I'd like to flip that a little bit. I'd like more focus on current clients, and former talent. But we can't ignore the cold prospects, especially if we have high aspirations of scaling and growth. But I say, but we need to narrow this down. We need to make sure that we're strategic. All too often, and David, you can, and Rachel, you can probably corroborate this. When we talk to a new client and we ask who their ideal client is, oftentimes they say anybody that hires. And that's not really your ideal client. Could they be a client? Sure. Are they your ideal client? No. We need to be very strategic in who we're reaching out to. We need to know what we're great at, and maybe even more importantly, what we're not great at. We need to make sure that we identify and have great case studies and great stories, and we arm our people with those stories so that we can showcase our expertise in key areas. Spray and pray or dial for dollars is no longer a strategic approach. We need to define exactly who our ideal client profile is, and we need to know by industry vertical. We need to know by revenue or employee range. The support that a large international organization with 5,000 employees needs versus a local manufacturer with 50 to 200 people is vastly different. What space do you play in and what space do you excel in? You need to know that. We need to look at geography. We can look at hiring patterns. We can look at operational complexity. Are we going after VMS and MSPs or no? Then, once you've defined exactly who your target or your ideal client profile is, I want you to take some time to define who the buyer personas are. David mentioned earlier, one of the reasons that selling is so hard right now is because staffing, HR, has become a strategic decision at companies. That means that you're probably involving the owner, the financial team, the risk team, the operations team, the admin team. All of those different people have a say in what vendor you choose. Some have more of a say than others. But in order to be effective in our sales and marketing outreach, we can't just key in and target one job title anymore. We need to have messaging that looks at the operations VP or the site manager, that takes into account the head of HR or talent acquisition, that engages the CFO or the finance partner or the CEO. We need to talk about what's most important to each one of those personas, and that's how we're going to get some success, and that's how we're going to get our foot in the door. Now, let's jump into what that kind of looks like. So, once we know who we're targeting, we need to focus on the how. How are we going to target them? How are we going to capture their attention? How are we going to progress them through the sales funnel? And that's where that multi-channel funnel development really comes into play. So let's look at that in practice. Now, David introduced some of these concepts already. We're going to get a little bit more granular. First and foremost, we want to look at sales enablement. Uh, we need to do more selling and we need to build more trust before your salespeople even talks with them because they're doing that research up front. We need to develop a collection of target account lists that's based on that very strategic, narrow ICP. We could look at things like creating personalized landing pages by industry or by job type. We need to create industry specific content. So if you're an expert in a certain type of healthcare staffing, that needs to be apparent. We need to speak directly to that unique individual niche. If you do 3PL, or maybe you do large event staffing or hospitality staffing, if you're not representing that in detail and sharing industry specific content that builds trust, why in the world would they consider working with you over a competitor? So think about all of those ICPs that you're going after and create content that adds value for them. We need to make sure that we have some executive level messaging mixed in too. So the CEO and the CFO are going to be more aligned with growth, more aligned with financials. Hiring managers are going to be more operationally focused. We need to understand what makes those people tick. We could use things like retargeting ads to those target accounts so that we get closer to that 20, 30, 40, 70 touch point with that decision maker before your sales team even calls. We can get aggressive with using lead scoring and tracking, and Rachel's going to highlight some of the ways that we can do that. Okay, but a few more acronyms to throw at you. You see in the graphic there, ABM, which is account-based marketing, and IDM, which is integrated direct marketing, are two methodologies to make sure that you're getting in front of the right audience. So with account-based marketing, we need to know if we're going after a company who all the stakeholders in that company are and who we need to win over. And then we need to create case studies, sell sheets, testimonials, industry data, maybe explainer videos, maybe email and LinkedIn sequences to touch all of those people with what matters to them. I'll share a real quick story. We've got a client that I'm working with. They're a healthcare recruiting company, very specialized. And what they've said is they're selling into large healthcare systems, and they were tired of dealing with talent acquisition and HR. A lot of you are probably shaking your head. You're probably tired of dealing with HR and talent acquisition too. Um, but they weren't making any ground. What was happening is they were going direct to the hiring managers, like nurse manager, department managers. They were winning those people over, and they're saying, yeah, we want to use you. We want to use you. And then what was happening? They were then getting directed back to HR and talent acquisition for the final step. So because they ignored TA and HR, those people were pissed and they felt that they were blindsided and those accounts didn't move forward. So a small change in this approach is not ignoring talent acquisition in HR, but it's including them in messaging that is directed to them in these campaigns, in this account-based marketing. So we still sold into the hiring manager. We won the hiring manager over, but during that entire process, we also have content going to TA, going to HR that corroborates and works together so that they don't feel blindsided. So I share this story just because even though you might want to skip over some certain segments within the companies that you're selling into, might not be the smartest move. We need to at least include those people and make sure that we have some visibility in front of those people so that they're not blindsided and so that they know about your organization and the value you can bring to them individually. All right, now let's talk a little bit about employer attraction. So, we want to make sure that clients come to you and we continue to feed your sales and marketing funnel. Okay, when people are searching for a staffing agency or a recruiting partner or a workforce consultant or a safety consultant, we want to make sure that they find you instead of a competitor. We do that through search engine optimization and now through AI optimization. How people search for a vendor now has changed dramatically with AI. And we've done full webinars on this, and you can find some of those recordings at lunchwithhaley.com. But people are now doing very deep, specific searches using ChatGPT or Gemini or other AI tools to really identify and find the exact right supplier that fits their niche audience. So I mentioned multiple times that we need to narrow down that ICP. It's becoming more important than ever because we need to narrow that down and create a whole bunch of content that speaks directly to that ICP in order to win the AI visibility battle. Then we can use paid search, we can use paid social, we can use retargeting. I'm an absolute huge fan of retargeting. So once somebody engages with you or once you've defined your target list, let's use online billboards just to stay in front of those people consistently. Because so many people now are involved in the staffing decision-making process, it's extended the length of that sales process, and we need to stay in front of them consistently. And retargeting is an amazing way to do that. And then let's get great at coming up with thought leadership content, stuff that really, really resonates with our audience and showcases our expertise, positions us as a partner rather than just a vendor. So, a few more slides here. Let's dig into each one of these and what that really looks like. So, AI optimization and SEO. I want you to think about focusing on what we call the big five topics. And this is an approach that a consultant and author, Marcus Sheridan, uses. And one that we've been using here and seeing a ton of success with. So those big five topics that you want to tackle are tied directly to what goes into that buying decision process. Their cost and price. How much do you cost, and how do you compare to your competitors? What does value look like? Problems. Those are individual problems that the buyer has. Comparisons. How do you compare against other vendors in the space? And then reviews and best in class. How do you corroborate, and do you have third party proof that you're really good? Let's build out content around all of those things. And let's say, you're not the low cost provider. Okay. Many of you aren't. I don't like to play in that space. What do you do to combat that? Well, you showcase value. Maybe you look at total workforce cost. Maybe you're more transparent about how you price things. Maybe you package things differently to make it more cost effective. Maybe you have different pricing models or different payment models. Looking at problems, identify those ICPs, identify the personas that you're selling into, those job titles that you're selling into, and answer all of their problems. Not just necessarily staffing or hiring or recruiting problems, but operational issues and challenges. If you've done great with building reviews online, that can be a great differentiator. I have a few clients who, in their local market, they have 4.9 or 5 stars. Maybe they have 400 or 500 reviews, and the next closest competitor is a 4.2 with 20 reviews. Who are you going to choose? You're going to choose the one that's vetted, that has built that great relationship. If you've done that, terrific. Leverage that. If you've won things like Clearly Rated's Best of Staffing, let's leverage that. Let's use it as a key differentiator. And then create local and industry pages, do intent driven content. The key here is that most people, 70% of their sales decision is made before they ever look at you. We need to make sure that they find you first and we prove value. Next, let's look at paid search, paid social, and retargeting. I think these are fantastic. Most people, when they're doing paid search, are looking to drive direct leads or direct job orders. And it can do that, but I think a better approach is for ICP awareness. It's looking at positioning. It's driving value and getting webinar signups. It's looking at amplifying your case studies. It's staying in front of people during those long buying cycles. It's staying in front and remarketing to people that already engaged with you in some way until the point where they actually reach out and place an order. Maybe it's promoting gated content, but it can be a great cost effective way to get you up to 20, 30, 70 touch points so that your salespeople can actually close. And next, I want you to think about thought leadership. We need to create some visibility that creates authority. We're doing this webinar to help educate you, to show that we're a partner, not just a marketing vendor. And it's a great way to share success stories. Now, some people will be able to do some of this on their own, and we encourage that. And some will need some help. But webinars, podcasts, great way to showcase that you're a partner, not a vendor. Look at LinkedIn newsletters, industry publications. YouTube is an amazing way to get in front of new people, get in front and own search and own AI. So just keep in mind that some of these touches are going to be no clicks. They're not going to lead to a form fill, but visibility is the key here. This provides that air cover. And then finally, let's look at building strategic referral channels. So think about who already is trusted by the prospects you're going after. Their accountants are. Maybe there's an HR consulting company out there, payroll companies, benefits, industry associations, chambers. We have several clients who have built great relationships with private equity firms, and they become the referral in. Referrals close oftentimes much faster and at higher margins. So look at co-branded webinars, referral agreements, shared content, roundtables, joint thought leadership promotions. It is a great way to get in front of other people and leverage their stages with their clients. So with that said, David, I'm going to turn it back over to you. Oh, you're on mute, David.
Geez, rookie mistake. You think I'd be beyond that? Before we transition, one of the things, Brad, you talked about is a lot of things that are driving people to a staffing firm's website. And one of the things we know is that, yeah, they're way down the sales pipeline by the time they get to your website, but by the time your site pops up, more than 90% of people leave without taking action. And one of the elements of the growth engine is having a website that is optimized for conversion. So we're not going to go through how to do that today, but we are going to repeat an offer we made last month. That is, if you'd like someone to look at your website and tell you what you could do to get more job orders from your site, then go to haleymarketing.com/website review. Give us your website URL and our team will conduct a review of your site, tell you what we see, and share ideas to help your site do more in terms of conversion. All right, with that said, Rachel, you get to bring us home with what can you automate?
David. So thinking about kind of your growth engine and what purpose automation serves within your growth engine, it's kind of like the turbocharge. You have your growth engine that's running, but automation helps it run faster, more efficiently, and helps you scale faster. So I know that Brad had mentioned a lot of things that you can automate throughout his slides, but I wanted to go into a couple of specifics and specific use cases that you can use automation for when you're building your growth engine. So the first, when thinking about automation and getting more contacts into your funnel at the top of funnel, some things that you can do is look into intent-based communication to find the right people and specifically target them at the right time. So you're building out your ICP, you have your ideal clients, and you know you're the right person, you know the right place, but this kind of helps you nail that right time. I heard someone say that you want to think about what happens to someone before they need my services. So, thinking about in staffing and recruiting, did someone recently change position? Did someone move into a new position within an organization and they're looking to build a team? Did someone on a talent acquisition team leave a position, which leaves a huge talent acquisition gap within an existing team? You can look at job postings. I think job postings is a perfect place to kind of scrape and see, are people hiring for the positions that I can fill? Company growth, I think Brad had mentioned this, looking at companies that are in hyper growth mode or looking to build new teams. A company opens up a new plant in a new location that they need to staff. Scraping reviews, looking at, are there competitors that the insight that you can glean from competitor reviews? Are there friction points on what's happening within an organization that I can gain from reviews that I find within that organization? And then targeting people that are visiting a website. I think this is the lowest hanging fruit. If you can use IP tracking and use website tracking to see if specific companies, contacts from specific companies are visiting pages on your website, you could then use that retargeting mindset to put them in your funnel and kind of retarget them with the right content. So this intent-based communication allows you to kind of look at, okay, what are triggers that I can find through automation, through scraping, through AI that help me get my message in front of the right people at the right time. And some things that we've been testing at Haley Marketing is using automation, AI, and scraping tools to kind of do this intent-based communication contact finding for us. I know it's really hard to go through and be like, okay, I'm going to look at every company on LinkedIn that's hiring, and I'm going to click through all the positions that they're hiring. Or I'm going to go through my ICP, all their websites, and I'm going to see what's going on all their websites. But there are a lot of tools out there now that leverage AI and automation to scrape a lot of this information for you. Some of the things that we're testing is using an automation tool called N8N and then a website scraper called Appify to scrape job postings from Indeed, ZipRecruiter, and LinkedIn pages, and then adding those job postings as custom fields in our database. So when we start outreach, we can say, okay, we're sending this message to everyone that has a hospitality position posted. Or we're sending this message and within our message, we're adding a variable or a custom area within that message that says you're hiring for XYZ. It allows us to really customize the communication that we're sending and make sure that we're sending that something that makes sense to the person at the right time. We're also using tools like N8N and Appify to scrape competitor reviews to see if we can get any insights to find friction points on what's happening within their organization. Is there a huge gap that maybe staffing and recruiting can fill? Is there something with the candidates that are currently in the position? Is there insight that we can gain from that? And we're also using tools like Apollo to flag recent position changes and growth signals on LinkedIn. So LinkedIn tracks headcount growth within an organization. It tracks if people are moving positions. So this has been really helpful to help us get kind of, rather than saying, okay, we have our ICP, we have HR managers at light industrial companies in the specific location, but kind of take that down and shrink that audience down a little bit smaller and say, okay, we know that these HR managers at these companies in this location have these job positions open and need to fill this because they're in hypergrowth mode. It helps us get a little bit more specific with the content that we're sending to these people. And then next, thinking about using automation in the middle of funnel. So you have someone who you've already reached out to, you have someone that has been in your funnel, maybe they filled out a form, but they've gone dead. How can you get them to the point where they are ready to talk to sales? And I think the main thing in the middle of funnel is using lead scoring. Brad had mentioned it earlier. You can track the engagements that your contacts have on what you're sending them, track the engagement on your website, track the engagement on the campaigns that you're sending to them. Even some platforms like HubSpot allow you to track if people are interacting with your ads at all, and then use kind of that insight from that scoring to determine how to follow up. So, for example, people who are engaging many times in many different places are closer to the buying process than someone who's not. So you can follow up with these people with a high touch sales focus sequence, understanding that they've already engaged at a specific level to push them more towards your salespeople. And then you have the people who are not engaging at all, maybe opened an email once or twice, maybe looked at the website a long time ago. Those people have lower scores. So you want to put them in a lower touch educational campaign because you know that they're not at the point where they're ready to buy and talk to sales yet. So thinking about scoring and how you're going to segment your audience based on how they're engaging is really effective because it helps move people who are showing a ton of intent through the funnel faster and people who are not showing intent to not overwhelm them, but also not let them go cold. And then if you have people who are filling out your forms and people who are ready to talk to someone, filling out a request talent form, viewing a request talent page, filling out your contact form, you can use automation to send notifications both to your sales team and follow-ups with these people right away so you don't lose track of them. I actually just talked to a client before this who had said that they had someone come in through the website, said they found them on organic search. They had reached out to 6 or 7 companies in the area, and my client had won their business because they were the first to follow up with them. So it just shows if you're letting leads come into your sales funnel and you're not following up with them right away, you run the risk of losing these deals to other people. And I think the standard is if you don't follow up within 7 minutes, I think the chance increases exponentially after those 7 minutes that this person will not go with your services. So automation really helps you get in front of them when they're in that buying stage, when they're ready to buy, and make sure that your sales team is in front of them at that time as well. And then use data insights that you have to segment your audience. Oh, sorry, David, I went a little fast there. Can we go back? One more. There we go. Sorry. Use data insights to segment your audience. So like Brad had mentioned, segment by job title, segment by industry, segment by company size. The message that you're sending is likely not going to be the same across the board. It can vary as much as job title. It can vary as much as company size. So just use the data that you have to segment your audience, and you can segment at the beginning of the funnel, you can segment in the middle of the funnel, but use that data to send people down different paths and provide different nurture content for them based on the insights that you have on their demographics. And then looking at the bottom of the funnel, I'd mentioned this earlier, leveraging autoresponder sequences so you don't lose hot leads. Autoresponders can follow up with a sales team calendar link right after someone submits a form. Can follow up to lay out next steps. Someone from our team will be in touch with you within 4 hours or X business days. And you can also use this to provide something of value to someone who has already expressed interest. So, we received your inquiry. Our team will follow up within 24 hours. Here is a recent job insights report that we think might be useful for you. So the automation allows you to stay in front of them, let them know what's happening next, but also give them something else so they continue to trust you throughout the process. And then the last thing, don't skip out on nurture for lost deals or deals that have gone cold. If you have someone who's been in your pipeline and maybe said now's not the right time or, stopped responding to you, using automation to create re-engagement sequences is super helpful at this point because it allows you to stay top of mind and in front of these people long term. And you can use automation to follow up after X number of days or X number of months to make sure that you stay top of mind and they continue to move through your funnel. We had implemented this for Haley marketing. Once someone has reached a certain stage and they hadn't responded, we put them in an unresponsive deal stage and then followed up with them 6 months later. And the amount of people that we got responding that said, hey, this is a good time to talk now, or hey, thanks for following up with me, was huge. And that was something that we did entirely through automation and something that our sales team didn't have to have hanging over their head, remembering to follow up with these people. It was something that was completely time-based and allowed us to stay in front of them long term. And then the last thing, use your contact statuses to automate your follow-up. I don't know how many clients I've talked to that aren't using their contact statuses in their CRM or ATS properly. This really allows you to leverage automation to its full capabilities. If you're just dumping everyone into your CRM or ATS and calling them an active client, even though they're not really active, you miss the opportunity to use automation to segment your communication based on where they are in your funnel. So if you use contact statuses like prospect, it allows you to trigger drip campaigns for those who are specifically prospects. If you're using your lead status, it allows you to send nurture content to people who are in the lead part of your funnel. And then active clients, it lets you track who's active. And then if you flip people to dormant clients after it's been 6 months or 12 months without a job order, it allows you to use automation to re-engage with them in a specific time period. So if you're thinking about automation and you're like, where do I start? How do I, what is this even going to look like? I think the contact status automation is something that's usually pretty easy to set up and low-hanging fruit and allows you to kind of divvy up the contacts that are in your ATS right now to run some of the automations that we talked about, like dormant client re-engagements or, follow-ups with leads that have gone cold or whatever that looks like. So I would suggest if you're looking for where to start with automation, looking at your contact statuses is always a really good place to start. And I'll pass it back over to David.
There you go. My mouse was not cooperating to get me in the right place, but let's see. We've got few minutes left to do a bit of a deep dive in Q&A. We have a few questions that have popped up. One overall, there's been a lot that we've covered. We had this growth engine. We talked about all of the things to do. And if somebody's busy and trying to sell, it can feel a little overwhelming. So do you have to do it all, or where do you start?
Yeah, good question, David. Do you have to do it all? I'm a big proponent of if you try to do it all, you're probably not going to do it all well. So, what I would do is really start by identifying who the ideal prospect is that you're trying to reach and make sure that you know what you do really well and make sure you're positioned in a way that clearly shows that you do it really well. I think that is first and foremost. And then for me, I've seen early success with dormant and past clients. I would start there. I would get some early wins, get your team excited, and then begin to grow from there.
Brad, I have something to add to the ICP. I think this was a recommendation from HubSpot in their buyer persona lesson. Look at all of the active clients that you have and your really, really good clients and see if there are any common themes along your active clients. Are they in a specific industry? Are they of a specific size? is there something that they all, a trait that they all share? And that usually helps you start at least identifying your ICP because it allows you to kind of uncover, okay, I'm really, really good at working with these type of people, and I have proof that I'm really good at that.
Yeah, great point, Rachel. And that kind of answers one of the other questions we got about refining and identifying your ICP. Like, how do you do it? I was working with a staffing company where they didn't know, and we exported everyone from their CRM from the past 5 years. And luckily, they had SIC codes with each of those. We were able to narrow down and identify. They thought it was really only four ICPs, and they had actually not realized that a huge portion of revenue had come from property management companies. Like this is a general staffing company, but just that exercise, we exported it all. We had AI analyze it, and just that exercise opened up a ICP that they didn't really realize was driving that much revenue, and now has become a big portion of their financials. So great exercise to do, and probably does make sense to start there.
Thanks, guys. Another thing you mentioned that's a buzzword everywhere is AIO. So EIO, GEO, AIO. Um, Brad, I know you and Sean on our team have been digging into this a lot.
Yeah.
Where do you start with that one?
Yeah, good question. So things are changing rapidly, right? So the way that people search for information, and not just in staffing, but in life, has changed dramatically because of AI. So what we need to do is make it clear and simple the value that we bring, and we need to build out our another buzzword, topical authority. So I hate to keep harping on this, but
Mhm.
it is so important that you identify your ICP and what you're great at, because once you do that, then we need to build content about that ICP, about the problems that that ICP faces, about the industry. And that's really how we win the AI search visibility battle. We become an authority or an expert on a specific topic. So I'll share something tactical. I'm working with a client right now in California that does healthcare staffing. They've got a big portion of their business that's being driven by radiology staffing and imaging staffing. So we looked at those top five categories, and we built out posts that looked at all of the different cities that they're in, and we did best of listicles where we listed our client because they truly are a best of in radiology staffing, as well as three or four of their direct competitors. Now, that can be a little intimidating to include one of your direct competitors on your website, but within 2 or 3 days, they're showing up as the source when people are looking for the best radiology agencies in a specific market in California. Great way to win AI search, drive visibility, and get you included in that list of vendors that every radiology practice should look at. So that's where I'd start.
Awesome. Thanks, Brad. All right, guys. Well, we've got the final 2 minutes, so I've got a slide or two left. Let me wrap it up, but thank you for the Q&A. And if the people have additional questions after this, you can always reach out and get a hold of us. But some final thoughts to bring it all home. This year, it's not just about pushing harder. It's not about killing yourself working 12 hours a day like the AI companies are doing in California. It's about finding ways to sell smarter, fixing the sales funnel, building that staffing growth engine, just to kind of take inventory. Where are you right now? Messaging. Do you have clear positioning, differentiators, value prop, and core story? Website. Do we have strong calls to action and conversion paths, particularly for employers? Or is our website still like it was 5 years ago, built to be candidate first? Sales enablement. Have we given your team the process and tools to succeed? You saw tons of examples today of what specific things you can do to put sales enablement into your business. Buyer enablement. Brad talked a lot about the different types of topics, just starting with those big five and producing content because it's going to help you rank. It's going to help you get found. It's also going to give your salespeople stuff to talk about and buyers stuff to move down the sales funnel so they're like as Rachel talked about, middle and bottom of the funnel when they're ready to engage with their sales team. Do we have employer attraction? Is there that game plan for the AIO and SEO, paid advertising, social and retargeting? Nurturing, are we doing everything possible to stay top of mind? Staffing is not a one call close. So, how do we put ourselves at the right place at the right time? And Rachel brought us home with the automation, top of funnel, middle of funnel, bottom of funnel. Are we doing the things to fully leverage automation to ensure consistency, continuity, fast response, persistence, and accelerate our results? So, thank you for those of you who made it all the way to the end of the hour. We do have a special thank you today. If you watch this webinar, an exclusive for webinars guests, we'll give you a free startup on our sales funnel automation services. That's a savings of more than $1,800. But here's the catch. You have to mention that you saw the webinar to get this. Otherwise, we're not passing along discounts. But reach out to Haley Marketing. You can reach us at info@haleymarketing.com. You can call us at 888-696-2900. That'll be up on the screen in a minute. And just mention, hey, I'm really interested in sales funnel automation. And Rachel and her team will help you put the sales enablement ideas you saw today into action. If you need help, there's the phone number. There's the email address. We're here to help. I want to thank everybody and especially thank Brad and Rachel for joining us on today's Lunch with Haley webinar. I think we have a final slide with what's coming up next. Yep, we're going to get into, I think it's the three of us again. It's going to be the Rachel, Brad, David show. We're going to be talking about essential sales tools for this year and some of the specific tactics and tools people are putting in place to help their sales teams sell smarter. And that is going to be a month away on Thursday, March 19th at our regular time, 2 o'clock Eastern. And again, from all of us at Haley Marketing, thank you so much for taking part in today's Lunch with Haley webinar. We'll see you next month.